And so I'll pass it over to Sharon, who has kind of got a foot in both camps. She's an entrepreneur, as well as someone who supports entrepreneurs in weaving inclusion into what they do kind of from day one. So I want to hear from Sharon on what specifically you're able to support people with in this moment, and then we'll open it up to the discussion for everyone to participate in, and Sharon as well, and as well as all the other presenters. So Sharon, over to you, last but not least.
Hi, everyone. I just want to mention that if you can hear, I'm outside and there's a canary, and it just showed up right when I unmuted myself. So she is also a part of my discussion, totally planned. Okay, so in the interest of saving time, and also because, to be frank, like everyone has mentioned, we've all been seeing the same things with women and women identifying entrepreneurs, so there's no need to repeat too much. What I'd like to do is just talk pretty directly to how those clusters of feedback we've all been getting from women entrepreneurs, ourselves included, and how I'm specifically working within that, and just ensuring that we don't lose out on some pretty critical things as we move forward. So first and foremost, in regards to a lot of entrepreneurs and folks who support entrepreneurs, kind of realizing more and more that in this specific time, the private has become public, in that the challenges that women entrepreneurs are facing are a lot more. They're public, as we're seeing now. And I give this example last week, which is, we can all see into each other's homes currently. And that makes things a lot easier to put aside or to ignore. And that speaks to sort of the bigger idea and the bigger reality, which is for women entrepreneurs, for entrepreneurs who are part of equity-seeking groups, including women of color, people of color in general, people with disabilities. What we're seeing as a result of COVID isn't necessarily new. Some of these challenges and these exclusionary practices, both institutionalized and otherwise, they're not actually as a result of COVID-19. They're just been sort of expanded and expedited with COVID-19. And that, I think, is why it's really important for me to be constantly shouting over the rooftops. And that's kind of, I'm starting backwards, which is the first piece of what I've been doing, which is a lot of advocacy and just ensuring that people who are working with entrepreneurs, organizations that work sort of, in the periphery with or, for entrepreneurs, to understand that responding to the challenges and the inclusion piece that we're currently seeing isn't a maybe later thing. It is we should have been doing this from the start, and now is a really great opportunity to get it done. And the way I tend to do this with clients, with organizations that I support, with individuals that I support, is trying to be very strategic and systematic about it. And that's the idea of using sort of like measurable and data informed. And that's a big part of my advocacy, is being super data informed. And also, I'm one of those people who's very vocal about, Canada becoming a lot more comfortable with disaggregated data. So for instance, I don't need the data in front of me because we're seeing it throughout the world, but a lot of organizations did not start with an inclusion lens, and that means they weren't collecting and disseminating disaggregated data. So for instance, a lot of organizations right now don't have any really ready to go idea to understand who they've been laying off. And so there have been a lot of layoff across industries, but who are these people? Are they mostly women? Are they people of color? Are they people in already, vulnerable positions? And are we tracking that? And so those are some of the things I'm working with the organizations that are sort of, in the periphery of entrepreneurship. But as we know, with entrepreneurship, we don't exist in a vacuum. Everything that is happening in bigger organizations, whatever, it affects us all. And so that's the advocacy piece. The second one is working with women entrepreneurs, myself included, to be honest, and organizations that support entrepreneurs, to be really systematic about this. And these are, Gina knows because she's heard me talk about this a couple of times. I sound like a broken record, but I'm always talking about data informed and measurable, and that applies also to refocusing. So that's the idea of sort of, everyone has talked about pivoting. Pivoting is a big word, and for a lot of new entrepreneurs, especially solo entrepreneurs who don't have the resources and the support to really understand what that means, we kind of break it down into what do you need to replicate in this moment as an entrepreneur. So for instance, I believe it was Winsome who started the session out by saying, you're trying to provide digital solutions to your current clients. And that's that idea, like breaking it down. What did I provide before COVID-19? And out of that, what is essential and needs to be replicated in this new way of working? What do I need to create out of the ground up right now to respond to this current moment, which is like, what new things do I need to be considering? And then what do I need to remove, which is the things that you may have done in the past, but either they're just not relevant right now, and you might find they're not relevant in the future at all. But going through that really systematic process of understanding what pivoting actually means. And then lastly, I've been working on my own and also with organizations that support entrepreneurs, and also just organizations that have staff. And to be honest, a big chunk of that will be women, people of color, everyone and anyone. And that's the idea of looking hard for hardship. We've all done these Zoom calls, and we've all been in meetings and conversations where, we all hear that idea of what can I do to help, or how can I support you, or how are you doing? And those are lovely. But, again, you'll hear me say again, measurable and data informed. If we don't have the structures to actually follow through with the what can I do, that becomes really difficult. And so I'm working with organizations to look hard for hardship, which means actually laying out who is on our team, who are we working with, who are we working for, what is their current reality. And, all of my sort of guest panelists, I don't really know what to call them in these panelist speakers, people on this call, have mentioned, what these hardship looks like. And then being really strategic. They're like, okay, so that's how we know what's coming in. Also, what are the structures we're creating to sieve through all this information? What structures and processes are we creating to capture this information, and how are we responding? So being very strategic about the whole thing. And I keep telling a lot of the folks I work with that as much as this crisis feels really urgent, and the responses we're seeing, thankfully, from government and whatnot are really quick, we don't necessarily need to act as if we're in crisis. We need to continue to be measured and thoughtful and intentional in the way we respond to this. Again, because, and this comes back to what I started with, a lot of what we're seeing isn't new. So, if it's taken us this long to figure some of this out, we can take a little bit longer to be really, really intentional about how we address them. And that's all for me.
Sharon, thank you so much. The chat just exploded, so obviously there's interest in hearing more from you. Sharon, as I mentioned, is one of our experts in residence. She did a brown bag lunch last week on more of this, of the challenges of what we need to do in this moment, and how inclusion can be baked in, and how we can be capturing data responsibly. And so if you're interested in getting the recording, just send me an email, and I can send that to you.